Now let's get started with the Romans. Not the Roman Empire, not just yet. Before Rome was an empire, it was a republic. And that is where we're going to start. And we're going to be centered around the Italian peninsula because that is where the Roman Republic is established, and from there it will spread. A little bit more context. So much of our everyday lives is affected because or by the Roman world. The fact that we have 365 days in the Julian calendar, you might hear people refer to it as the Julian calendar. Who's Julian? Julian, they're referring to Julius Caesar, one of the most famous Romans. And the establishment of the 365 days by the Romans with the help of the Greeks and the ancient Near Eastern cultures, is what we still use today, the Julian calendar. In terms of religion and faith, it is remarkably similar to the Greeks. I like this little comic here. The Greeks say, "Hail Zeus!" The Romans call him Jupiter, so "Hail Jupiter!" Here is just a quick list of the Greeks and the Romans. It's the same mythology, and some of the names will stay the same, like Apollo and Apollo. But major players that we've already looked at, Aphrodite, she becomes Venus. Let's see, Athena becomes Minerva. Zeus becomes Jupiter. Let's see, where is he? Poseidon becomes Neptune. So the myths will stay the same. They adopted the same mythology as the Greeks, but with their own language, they applied their own names to these figures. Also, the Romans spoke Latin. That is their language. We've already seen this come to play when we're discussing artworks in this class, right? I've had to correct us to use the Greek rather than the Latin word. So the Greeks spoke Greek, the Romans spoke Latin. We saw that play with like Venus and Aphrodite, or Neos and Sella. So the Romans are speaking Latin. Now they did have a polytheistic faith. They also were rather accepting of other religious cults or practices of polytheism around Mesopotamia and Egypt, other areas of North Africa. And so it's not uncommon in the Roman world to see these hybrids or dual faiths. In addition, the Romans revered ancestors or ancestor worship, and they had household gods. This means it was common, or it was typical for Roman houses to have smaller altars inside of their homes where they would provide gifts, offerings, or maintain a relationship with their ancestors, their past, their lineage, and various minor gods. Unlike the Greeks, the Roman gods were much more politically involved in their everyday lives. What do I mean by that? The Greeks had established a mythology of gods, and they seem to have, in their everyday lives, kept the gods apart or separate from the everyday activities of the people milling around the cities and around the countryside. For the Romans, the gods were very much a part of your everyday life. So it makes sense to have these personal altars in your houses for you to maintain those relationships. The Roman gods were much more involved in politics. So the rise and fall of political figures, battles, those were much more closely observed for the favors or the disfavors of gods. Basically, what I'm trying to say, and I want you to write this down, is for the Romans, they believed things are good here on earth because the gods are happy. Things are bad here on earth because the gods are mad. So if we want to keep things good, we got to keep the gods happy. So what we see in the Roman world is a lot more politically aligned religious artworks and structures and buildings because it is seen as a direct link between the gods and the Romans themselves. Happy gods, happy people. Sad, mad gods, sad, mad people. Does that make sense? Just because I love talking about these things, I want to tell you about the Vestal Virgins. You may have heard of them before. So the Vestal Virgins were a group of young women who were of aristocratic birth, and they served as priestess to the goddess Vesta. Now, Vesta is a goddess of the home, more specifically the hearth. And the hearth is the site in front of the fire, central fire. That is the symbol of warmth, of life, of vitality, and maintenance of the everyday lives of everyday Romans. The capital city of Rome had a major temple dedicated to Vesta with an eternal flame. An eternal flame meaning there was a fire dedicated to Vesta, goddess of the hearth, and it was never to go out. The Vestal Virgins were the priestess who attended to the flame and therefore ensured the health and happiness and vitality of every Roman citizen. To be a Vestal priestess was to commit your life to the dedication of, or commit your life to the maintenance of, what am I trying to say? To be a Vestal Virgin, first you had to be of aristocratic birth, of noble birth. So you had to come from a noble family. And at the age of 10, you were selected, and it would have been a great honor to you and to your family. To be selected, though, you had to have no physical imperfections. So at the age of 10, they would size you up, and if you were beautiful, without any kind of physical imperfections, which for a 10-year-old, come on, that's right before puberty, or also awkward, you would be selected and then taken away from your family, and you would commit to 30 years of living for the goddess Vesta. 10 years would be in training, 10 years would be in service, and then 10 years would be in the training of others. Now their name, the Vestal Virgins, should indicate to you no sex. Yeah, it was seen as to be defiling of your temple, your body, if you were to have sex. So Vestal Virgins were not allowed to have sex. If they were to be found having sex, the punishment would be horrific. They would be buried alive. Now you might be thinking, I don't want to do this. Remember, it's a great honor to be a Vestal Virgin. Also, they were free to administer their own affairs without any kind of male guardianship, which no other Roman woman could say at the time. Their expenses were paid by the state, and they had this, what's the word? Sorry, my puppy had a loud toy and I had to grab it from him. Okay, Vestal Virgins. So states, expenses paid by the state, and you had your own independence. Vestal Virgins were honored guests at political events and public celebrations, and they would be carried on lecterns. So you'd have those two guys in the front, two guys in the back, and they'd be holding those poles, and then you'd be sitting up there on the top of the chair. And then there was this thing where if a condemned prisoner were to cross the path of a Vestal Virgin during her route through the city, that prisoner was then immediately exonerated and his death sentence was lifted. So that's something, right? After 30 years of service, then you would be able to leave and you could marry afterwards. But think about it, at the time, you would probably be about 40 years old. The average lifespan of a Roman woman was to be about 40, 45 years old. So you got like 5 years left, and then you're probably going to die of some kind of disease. I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm getting distracted. Okay. Now, we will see the Roman world expand beyond the Italian peninsula, and during the empire, Rome will occupy territory from England down to Egypt, and from Syria across to Spain. But we start with the Republic, established in 509, when they expelled their Etruscan king. So Rome expels the Etruscans in 509, establishes a republic, meaning a representative government. The republic, which we'll look at in more detail, is a founding element of the United States of America much, much later. So many things, I get so distracted. Okay, back to the map. So Rome pushes out the Etruscan king. They establish a republic, and then they rapidly start taking territory. And by 300 BCE, they have taken the Etruscan territories, absorbed them into their own culture, and that's what we saw with Eule Metele. And then as they continue to expand and take the entire Italian peninsula, they establish a Roman republic. Let me just, hold on 1 minute. Here. The Roman Republic is a representative government, and that representative government is held up to a constitution. So, a constitutional government. They had a Senate, which literally translates from the Latin to a council of elders. Senate literally means a group of old guys. Now, while the Senate was the representative body for the people of Rome, in times of crisis, they could declare a dictator. A dictator was set with absolute power for a limited time and a limited purpose. So in times of war or famine, there would be a singular person who would have greater control over the republic. The ruling class of Rome are referred to as the patricians. They were the wealthy landowners. You can think of them as the aristocracy or the noble class. And then those free men who were not landowners, but were citizens of the republic, such as farmers and merchants, they were referred to as plebeians. Aha! Now, I did emphasize the word men, because in the Roman world, no women. And this is a slave-based society. So it is a republic of representatives for free men. There were free women, but you don't count. You're not a full citizen. And then, of course, it is a slave-based economy, very similar to what we were talking about in the Greek world, where the slave system is based on just simply not being Roman. And slaves are part of the labor force, and they are part of the economy and used as import and export goods throughout the Republic and the later empire. Now, the Republic, look at the dates there, 509 to 27 BCE. This is a 500-year period. And during that time, we see this rapid expansion outside of the peninsula. And here we are looking at the largest boundaries of the Republic. You see that? So we see this spread out of the Italian peninsula up. They absorb Greece and the surrounding areas that we had been looking at. They take the Anatolian peninsula. The city of Pergamon itself will fall with the death of their last king. And here in this map, you're thinking, well, that's it? Then where does the empire come? This is the expanse of the republic right before it becomes an empire, and then it will expand even more. Got it? Okay. One thing that we really don't get to talk a lot about in this class, because we have to focus on the artwork, are all the battles that happened during the Roman Republic and a lot of those military figures. I will tell you that there was a series of wars for control over the Mediterranean Sea, the series of wars between the Romans and their neighbors in the south, the Carthaginians, and their capital was Carthage. These were a series of wars referred to as the Punic Wars. They are very interesting, but we cannot talk about it in this class. And they, spoiler alert, defeat Carthage, completely wipe out the people and their culture. To this day, we still struggle to find evidence of the Carthaginians beyond the writings of the Romans. We have records of the systematic destruction of the people of Carthage that had occupied or controlled and reigned over North Africa and pieces of Spain as well. Oh goodness, what else? Their defeat of Greece. Their defeat of Greece fed with this craze for all things Greek, and that's why we have the what's it called? The Rhaetia warriors, because the Roman ships were taking all of that Greek stuff and bringing it over to be sold on the Italian peninsula. That's why we have the boxer, the seated boxer. He's a Greek figure that was brought to the capital city of Rome. So we see this craze for all the Greek works, art, antiquity, and they're going to take all of that and then make copies, all those Roman copies, all those marble Roman copies of those bronze originals. Oh, goodness gracious. So, yeah, it's a lot going on. Let's look at the art.